Hello and welcome to my review of Kurzweil's How to Create a Mind. First, I'll give the reason why I chose to read this book. Secondly, I'll give a brief overview of the book itself. Lastly, I'll share my opinions and thoughts on the book. The desire to read this book originated while reading another book authored by James Barrett called Our Final Invention. It discusses the coming singularity and what it all means. In Our Final Invention by James Barrett, he mentions a statement made by Larry Page, the co-founder of Google. Larry Page discusses a scenario that in the future, and I quote, where you merely think of a question, and Google whispers the answer into your ear. Needless to say, I found this rather perplexing. The more I thought about such a thing, the more implausible it became to me. The human brain and computers are not compatible, they do not speak the same language, nor can they. Computers speak in binary code. Binary code is made up of ones and zeros. Binary code creates image files, text files, all kinds of data files, web pages and so on. But they do not create human thought, nor can they. In other words, let's say you're surfing the web and decided you want to download a music file, to store in your brain's RAM. Unfortunately, this is not possible. The wetware of one's brain can never interface with the hardware of a computer. Now, to be fair, I do not know the full context of Larry Page's statement. So my attentions were directed towards Mr. Kurzweil. Kurzweil is infamous for these sort of outlandish claims, and I was curious to see what he has to say on this topic in particular. So once I completed James Barrett's book, I began to read How to Create a Mind. First, I'll begin with a brief overview. He begins with some famous thought experiments made by household names: Charles Darwin and Albert Einstein. He describes where Charles Darwin got his initial idea for the theory of evolution. There was a 19th century geologist by the name of Charles Lyell, that pondered how canyons were formed. He theorized that the movement of water over long periods of time helped form and carve the landscapes of canyons. Darwin adopted this idea, and applied it to the species. Similarly, Kurzweil would have thought experiments of his own. Through simple observation of everyday tasks, Kurzweil fashions his very own theory to explain the functioning of the human mind. His conclusions? First, he states that memory is stored in a sequential manner. For example, one person can easily recite the alphabet from A to Z, but to do so in reverse order is very difficult. Tasks are difficult to begin at the midpoint as well for the same reason. Language. He speaks of how language functions similarly to the human mind. The mind, he concluded, works in a hierarchical fashion. What does this mean? For example, take the English language. At the lowest levels you have letters, a layer up. You have words, then sentences, paragraphs, and so on. He describes how our brain functions in a similar way. He states that our brain is made up of pattern recognizers. He estimates that a human mind has approximately 300 million pattern recognizers. What is it? A pattern recognizer, at the very lowest levels, will be triggered by the crossbar, in the letter A. At a higher level up, the letter A itself. Higher, it will recognize the word apple. At higher levels, recognizers will identify humor, irony, an individual's face, even beauty. The most fascinating discussion, in my opinion, has to do with the synthetic neocortex. Remember Larry Page? Here, Kurzweil speaks of the nature of how we will one day interface with a computer. And we will do so via a virtual brain. The brain itself won't even know where it ends, and where the virtual brain begins. Brain augmentation, will allow the addition of millions, perhaps billions more pattern recognizers. So your virtual brain will respect the principles of your natural brain. So my thoughts. I enjoyed it, I thought it was a fascinating read. And I do recommend it to others to read and absorb. I'm not quite sure what it means, that the average person on the street will have an intelligence that is billions times greater than Albert Einstein. The problem with Kurzweil is his overly optimistic views of the future. Fact is, that he doesn't give fair time to the slightly unpleasant scenarios that can occur. But ultimately I did enjoy it.